Pope takes a poop and the president too, and the fancy pants banker in his three-piece suit, the big fat general and all of his troops. The truth of the matter is everybody poops. The famous brain surgeon has to leave his lump, and the high-priced model has to stop for a dump. The can the size of Canada can't spray away the truth, cause even if they don't admit it, everybody poops.
Hi, Nicole. So you are currently watching the first video of Cecile and I's vegan series, which we'll be releasing this June or this month. And in the next few months, we'll be releasing some videos every now and then, just to kind of give an overview or just give new perspectives, new information about veganism that you may be interested in. So please feel free to check them out. So this video is why we went vegan, just to kind of start it all off. Why would one do such a thing? Why would one just stop eating meat, dairy, and eggs? That's a question I get often. And so that's what this video is about. I'll be explaining why. So it's about a month ago, I was visiting, oh sorry, not a month ago, a year ago, I was visiting some family in Brazil. My family's from there, my mom, and we'll be eating meat and dairy probably 2 or 3 times a day. And I was coming from home from here, and I just don't do that. I just never used to eat that much meat anyways, and so all of a sudden my body just had to eat 2 or 3 times a day. It was a shock to the system. My body was just like, no. So I was visiting my uncle on his cattle ranch in Brazil, and so we were eating even more meat every day. And so then out of the blue I decided to watch Conspiracy, which I've been meaning to watch for a really long time. And for those of you who don't know what Conspiracy is, it is a documentary on Netflix and Amazon, I think, and Hulu. Sure. It's a documentary that gives out lots of information. It has lots of testimonials from lots of researchers and authors all over the world in various different fields relating to the environment, sustainability, sustainable development, and they just talk about the effects of the meat and dairy industries and how it's just no longer sustainable for us to consume as much meat, dairy, and eggs as we are currently consuming. And so yeah, I'd always considered myself to be an environmentalist, but I'd always needed that kind of push, and so that's what that movie was. It just kind of jump-started me into veganism, which I don't regret at all. So so in this video we'll be talking about the health consequences, the environmental consequences, and the ethical reasons for becoming vegan. I'm about to give out a lot of statistics, so erase yourselves. So in terms of the environment, the livestock sector has a pretty big impact, and an impact that you're probably not completely aware of. According to a report released by Stanford a couple of years ago, more than 1.7 billion animals are used for the livestock sector today, and they occupy more than 1/4 of Earth's land. That's a lot. And production of animal feed, so not even animals themselves, but the food that the animals will consume for 3 or 4 years before they can even become meat that we eat in our dinner plates, they take up more than 1/3 of total arable land. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, which we constantly hear about in the media, you probably think of one gas in particular, which is CO2. The livestock sector does have a huge impact on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, but not just CO2. The livestock sector is a major player in greenhouse gas emissions, emitting nearly 18% of total greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. And that's higher than transport at roughly 13.5%. Think about that for a second. Cows emit more greenhouse gases than all the cars, trucks, vans, and airplanes worldwide. And we're constantly told, drive less, it emits CO2. Actually, the livestock sector releases some more powerful and dangerous greenhouse gases than just CO2. The livestock sector does release CO2, but only 9% of anthropogenic CO2. And although that may not seem like a lot, the reasons are pretty bad. More importantly are the other gases that the livestock sector emits. The livestock sector emits nearly 37% of total global methane. And methane has 23 times the global warming potential of CO2. And the livestock sector also emits 65% of total nitrous oxide. And nitrous oxide has 296 times the global warming potential of CO2. These two gases are largely emitted from manure, and manure is released by livestock. According to the EPA, in 2007, U.S. feeding operations generated about 500 million tons of manure. And that's 3 times the amount of human waste generated in a year. And although manure is a valuable nutrient for plants, it does also release lots of harmful chemicals like antibiotics and hormones and other fertilizers that are fed or that are used in livestock production. The livestock sector is responsible for 64% of ammonia emissions, and ammonia is responsible for acid rain, acidification of our ecosystems, and algal blooms in our oceans. Our world is currently in a situation of water shortage and will soon be facing scarcity and depletion. It's estimated that by 2025, nearly 64% of the global population will live in water-stressed conditions. And unfortunately, the livestock sector accounts for nearly 8% of total global water use. The livestock sector is probably the largest sectoral source of water pollution, contributing to eutrophication, dead zones in coastal areas, degradations of coral reefs, human health problems, and antibiotic resistance. Major sources of pollution are from animal waste, chemicals from tanneries, pesticides and fertilizers for, once again, feed crop, hormones, and sediments from eroded pastures. Given our current situation of water scarcity, we need to be very careful and very cognizant of how we use water and how much is wasted. So, is it really worth it? That's what we need to ask ourselves. In terms of reduction in biodiversity, the livestock sector also plays a huge part. Livestock now account for nearly 20% of total terrestrial animal biomass. Livestock sector may also well be one of the leading drivers of biodiversity loss, as it is a main player in deforestation, climate change, overfishing, sedimentation of our coral reefs. According to the Worldwide Fund for Nature, a report suggested that nearly 306 of 825 ecoregions spanning across all the biomes of the globe listed livestock as one of the biggest threats. It is estimated that the population is going to increase from 6.8 billion people today to 9 billion people by 2050. That is a lot of people. And with that increase in population, meat consumption is also going to rise. It's been estimated that annual per capita meat consumption is going to increase from 229 million tons in 1990 to 465 million tons in 2050. Annual per capita milk consumption is also expected to rise from 580 million tons today to nearly 1,043 million tons by 2050. With growing populations and the average income of people around the world also increasing, people are rapidly shifting towards a Western diet, which is very high in meat, dairy, and eggs. At its current level, it is no longer sustainable to eat as much meat and dairy as we are currently consuming. And imagine when the population is 9 billion people. We really have to evaluate our decisions when we go shopping, when we go to the supermarket. What do we eat for dinner? Most U.S. livestock are fattened on corn, soybean meal, and other grains. And these grains are heavily intensive on water, on land, on fertilizers, and pesticides. And that doesn't even account for the water and the land that is required to grow the animals themselves. So the livestock and dairy industries are very, very intensive on resources that we can't supply for everyone in the world who's now shifting towards our diets. And feed crops in the meat and dairy industries in general are heavily subsidized by the federal government, primarily the US government. And so we aren't bearing the true costs of a burger when we go out for dinner. Not only are we not bearing the true economic cost of the burger, we're also not bearing the social and environmental cost of it as well. And so this system, where the federal government is propping up the meat and dairy industry, is only propagating this overconsumption of meat and dairy, of products that we just cannot continue consuming at the level that we are. And the continued use of land, water, and resources that are having harmful effects on our environment. Okay, so enough of the bad stuff. So being vegan also has some pretty good health benefits. Although vegan diets are constantly criticized by the media for not providing enough protein, calcium, and other micronutrients, that's actually not 100% true. In the next few videos, I'll be talking more about resources and nutrients and micronutrients they need to be aware of. But well-plated vegan diets do provide an abundant amount of antioxidants and protective phytochemicals to help prevent and treat various chronic diseases like asthma, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, gallbladder disease, gastrointestinal disease, obesity, fibromyalgia, as well as others. Vegans also appear to be at an advantage when it comes to blood pressure, cholesterol metabolism, inflammation, homocysteine levels, as well as other things. In several studies, vegans, and primarily raw vegans, were shown to have lower levels of tumor promoters, less DNA damage, more protection against DNA damage. and less toxins known to promote cancer. And lastly, I'm going to talk about animal rights. I'm going to focus specifically on cattle, but do know that chickens, pigs, cows, and fish all endure unimaginable suffering from the current system we have today. So in 1990, nearly 41% of Americans lived on small farms. Today, that number has dropped to 1.9%. So how has our increased demand in meat, dairy, and eggs increased while also decreasing the amount of farmers in the US today? And that's because of something known as agribusiness, whose goal is to basically turn animals into units of production, generating as much meat, dairy, and eggs as possible with the least amount of water, land, resources, and money as possible, while also decreasing the amount of time it takes to get the animal to the slaughterhouse. And the most efficient way to do that is by enclosing animals in small spaces, giving them hormones to gain weight more quickly, giving them antibiotics to prevent diseases which are common in feeding operations, and to give them cheap feed. So cows are among the few animals that get to spend their lives outdoors, often for only 7 to 9 years. However, they have a lifespan of roughly 20 years. Cows are designed to eat a highly foraged, high-fiber diet low in starch. Instead, cattle are given high grain-based diets, which help them gain weight very quickly, but have also been shown to give them various health problems. Livestock feed is routinely laced with antibiotics so that they can resist diseases. Livestock currently receive an estimated 70% of all antibiotics taken in the US. That is absolutely ridiculous. Cows take more antibiotics than humans do in the US, and without a doubt, that contributes to increasing rates of antibiotic resistance. Cattle producers have also been known to give their cows hormones since the 1950s. This reduces costs, allows them to grow more quickly, and it also produces more lean meat, which is mostly in line with consumer preferences. And of course, the last step in the life of a cow, as well as other animals bred for production, is the slaughterhouse. So cows specifically are lined up onto a ramp where they're then stunned and hoisted up onto an assembly line where their throats are then slit. Slaughterhouses are among the most dangerous workplaces in North America today. Back in the day, slaughterhouse workers were unionized, received a stable pay, and working in the slaughterhouse industry was fairly stable. Today, that's not exactly the case. Slaughterhouse workers are no longer unionized, pay is very low, line speeds have increased so much that accidents have multiplied. So I know that was a lot of information, and believe me, it was. But like I said before, I only scratched the surface of all the information related to the meat and dairy industries. And so I highly recommend that if you want to learn more, check out the links that I posted below. They give a lot of information about why you should become vegan. Also, if you want to fact check what I said, all the information is there. So then in the next few videos, Cecile and I will be talking about myths related to veganism. So what's true, what isn't true, as I'm sure you've all heard something from the media or from someone else around about veganism. So we'll also be talking about the nutrients, the macronutrients, what you need to be aware of when you become vegan. For me, that's the most important video because you don't want to just go vegan right out of nowhere like I did. That was not the best idea. And then lastly, for this month, we will be talking about how veganism affects your social life, or how to break those social barriers, which is also pretty important when you go vegan. Also, I've put up the link for some documentaries, principally Conspiracy, which is the documentary that changed my life, and I believe Cecile's as well. So please check them out. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next few videos. Bye!